Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C., and addressing the California crisis and, by extension, really all state budget crises. This is a 9-point program distributed this weekend at the Conspiracy Conference in Santa Clara, California, this past weekend, and posted also at actindependent.org. It's up at Rents, many other websites by now in the meantime. So this is an action program with hopefully action, struggle, up to the point of a general strike, a mass strike, to back it up. Because when the bankers come and propose to strip you and flay you alive, what do? You fight back. You're not an Austrian. You fight bankers. You don't stand around complaining about big government. You get out there and fight for your economic rights, because people do have economic rights, and they've got to assert them. So therefore, every state needs a 1% Tobin tax on derivatives and speculation. Most states have some kind of regressive tax. It's often a sales tax. This is disastrous tax policy. You need progressive taxation. That's most easily done in the area of income tax. But the worst kinds of taxes are these things like sales tax. This is why oligarchs like them, because they pay much less. Therefore, we look around for flows of wealth which are untapped and untaxed, and we find speculative activity, derivatives, stocks, bonds, options, futures. These are, of course, derivatives, foreign currency, commodity speculation, all kinds of things that you want to discourage in any case. Cancerous, fictitious, bloated derivatives and other kinds of paper claims on production. So in California, 9% sales tax approximately for the people. You want to buy your kid a pair of shoes, you pay 9%. The banker wants to send through $10 billion of derivatives. What does he pay? So far, 0. This is inequitable. This is one-sided. Makes no sense. This is the result of 40 years of reactionary Republican policy, by and large, right? When the Republicans had the White House 7 out of 10 times, and the Democrats were not that great. So therefore, we're left with this kind of a situation. So 1% Tobin tax, 1% securities transfer tax on all financial transactions inside your state, in this case California, to be paid by the broker. In other words, the institutional investor, be that the buyer or the seller, makes no difference. The institutional investor, once identified, pays. Now, of course, the bankers will howl. The bankers will say, well, we'll leave California. Well, obviously this is one point where it helps to have many states doing it, but no banker is going to deprive himself of the possibility of looting and sacking and exploiting the 8th largest economy in this case. So that's the securities transfer tax. Now, another thing you could do and should consider, foundations. Foundations represent a huge mass of undertaxed wealth, and they are used largely for social manipulation, to cause trouble, to foment racial conflict, to support all kinds of ideologues. We've just had the foundation-funded racist ideologue, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, come back on the horizon this past week. That guy is foundation-funded. His church has within it individuals who have been funded by the Ford Foundation. Therefore, branches of these foundations in various states should be hit with some kind of a surtax. How about a 10% surtax, this time on their assets, on their holdings, not their income, but what they own, their endowment. Foundation endowments should get a 10% surtax for the duration of the crisis. So there's a way to plug the budget gap. Foreclosures, point 2. Every state, starting with California, should impose a freeze, a halt, a stop on all foreclosures by law, not voluntary, but obligatory, and with jail terms backing it up. The primary residence of an American family is sacrosanct. Nobody but nobody kicks you out for reasons of financial non-payment in the middle of a world depression, because otherwise you are threatening the fabric of civilization itself. This also goes for farms, businesses, transportation. By that I mean trucking companies, taxi companies, any other activity, the classic restaurant, dry cleaner, or other local service. Anything productive, anything socially necessary. No foreclosures for 5 years or for the duration of this World Economic Depression, whichever lasts longer. All the details of repayment and so forth can be worked out later, but what you cannot do is destroy civilization in the meantime and then figure out the payments. We've also got Obamavilles sprouting up. California is a very big state for Obamavilles. Obamavilles, of course, the tent cities, the new Hoovervilles. What used to be called a Hooverville is now an Obamaville, and they are growing, and they will surpass and eclipse anything that happened under Herbert Hoover, because this blasé elitist in the White House is even less interested in the plight of the American people. Actually, he has an active hostility compared to Hoover, whatever Hoover thought. So stop all foreclosures. And again, the bankers will howl. They'll go to court. Fine, fight them in the courts. Give, in this case, Jerry Brown. The Attorney General of California is Jerry Brown. Jerry, get out there and fight to stop foreclosures. Okay, take a look at your Catholic social doctrine. It says that property rights are not absolute, but are relative to social responsibility. In other words, social responsibility has got to come in and temper and mitigate that harsh Calvinist stuff about property rights. Now, another thing you can do, how about interest rates? You've got people now who are getting ripped off to the tune of 30% interest on their credit cards as the zombie bankers collapse inevitably into bankruptcy. They're, of course, determined to take as many people with them as they can. So as they go down, what they're doing is jacking up the interest rates on credit cards. Now, once upon a time, before trilateral puppet Jimmy Carter seized the White House with the accompanying damage then done by Paul Adolph Volcker, the other trilateral member who was given control of the Federal Reserve, we used to have something called usury laws. States had usury laws, which would simply say that the maximum interest rate that can be charged on transactions within the state was usually 10%. Now, of course, as Volcker jacked up the federal prime rate, the Federal Reserve prime rate, illegally and unaccountably and unconstitutionally, as we know, that blew out the state usury laws. You can read about this in Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide through the worst financial crisis in human history, Surviving the Cataclysm, available from progressivepress.com, www.progressivepress.com, or if you prefer, Amazon.com now has the Surviving the Cataclysm. So what you ought to do is reimpose that, set a 10% upper limit on interest rates, and with that you've given people relief because you've lowered their interest rate on the credit card. Back in a minute.